All right, so for this video, we're just going to go over two different questions. One is going to be multiplying decimals, and the other one's going to be dividing with decimals. If after this video you still need more help with it, just reach out and I can make another video going over whatever it is that you need from that. But just to give you something to reference in case you forget. So when we multiply 4.32 times 1.5, we do this what we actually do is first we're going to rewrite both of these numbers as just whole numbers. So I'm going to think of this as multiplying 432 by 15. So now we're manipulating and putting it in a form that you guys have been doing for years now, or could do for years now. But when you do that, what we need to do is remember how many decimal places we just took away. So we have 1, 2, 3 different decimal places that we removed from those numbers. So we need to remember that for at the end of this problem for when we finish our multiplication. So I'm going to multiply it as if it's 432 times 15. And when we do this, first we're going to go with our ones and do 5 times 2 is 10, carry the 1. 5 times 3 is 15, plus 1 is 16. 5 times 4 is 20, plus 1 is 21. And now when we move on to the 1 or a tens place, I need to remember that I put my 0 here because we're now 10 times anything is always going to give us 10. So now we need to make sure we put that 0. So 1 times 2 is 2. 1 times 3 is 3. 1 times 4 is 4. And then we're going to go ahead and add down. And this gives me 0, 8, 4, and 6. So what we need to remember now, though, is we created this 432 and 15 by removing these decimals, but now we need to put them back. So the amount of decimals we removed are the amount of decimals we need to put back. And since the decimal is understood to be after the 0, I'm going to count 1, 2, 3. So then our final answer is 6.48. Now, you guys have learned how to multiply decimals before, so that's not what's new here. What's new is remembering that now when we multiply, let's say this was negative 400 or 4.32 times 1.5, that gives us a negative at the end. So we're just applying these new multiplication rules to things that you should already have down, but if you don't, it's okay. We just need to just make sure we're practicing how to multiply these decimals again. So now we're going to go through, and the next problem is dividing decimals. All right, so now we're going to go through 17.52 divided by 1.2, and same thing as before. The skill that we're learning is not the division of decimals. That's something that you learned in previous years. What we're doing now is just applying the new rules of, well, what happens if this was actually a negative divided by a negative? So we're taking what you learned before and just applying a new rule to it. So if you forget, though, how to divide with decimals, that's what this video is for, is just to quickly go back over it. So I'm not explaining it necessarily as in depth I would if we were learning it for the first time. It's just maybe here to help refresh your memory. So when we're dividing 1.2 into 17.52. So we can write 17.52 in, and we write 1.2 on the outside. So from here, though, we don't really like dealing with decimals with what we're dividing by, because we might not know our 1.2 multiples as well as we do 12. So what we do is removing this decimal one place to make this a whole number, 12. So if I'm doing that with the number I'm dividing by, I need to move that decimal that one place as well. So now we can think of it as 175.2 divided by 12. And once again, if you're not sure why we do that, then come and talk to me and I can explain this in more detail. But here, it's not so much of the dividing that we're learning, but more of the rules of the negative and positive with it. So now as we're dividing, we see, does 12 go into 1? No. So we move into the 17. 12 goes into 17 one time. 1 times 12 gives me 12, so I can now subtract. And 17 times minus 12 gives me 5. And now I'm going to bring this next 5 down. And I still have the 0.2. So now I look and say, okay, well, how many times does 12 go into 55? Well, 12 goes into 55 4 times, and 4 times 12 gives me 48. So now I can subtract and bring down that 7. And don't forget our decimal 2. So now that I'm going over that decimal, I'm moving and including that decimal. I need to make sure I put the decimal in my answer, because now I'm going beyond the decimal. And now I said, well, how many times does 12 go into 72? And it goes into it 6 times. And 6 times 12 is 72. So that's going to subtract and give me a remainder of 0. So now I know that my final answer is 14.6. So remember, what we're learning now is not how to divide these decimals, but it's just the rules of, well, what would happen if this was a negative divided by negative? And that will then give us a positive 14.6 in return. If you're not sure how to do this, just let me know, and we can then make sure that you're understanding how to divide decimals better. That's it for this video.